during my childhood, my adulthood, I know that it wasn't but for the grace of God that we all sit in this room today. When you think about the 50s and 60s, the period that I grew up as a child in this community, the most that any adult African American could have hoped for to be a prominent citizen was to have a job working either at TCI, Tennessee Coal and Iron Company, or U.S. Steel, or working for Pullman, Railroad Cars and Bessemer, or being a minister, or a teacher. Those were the top jobs in the African American community. If you worked in retail, usually you were the elevator operator, or you cleaned up in the store and things of that nature. You had no hopes or dreams of being anything more than what you were. But it was a good life. It was a good life from the standpoint that that was all individuals knew. But then when one began to look at the oppressive nature of the laws that existed at the time, the fact that African Americans, and let me go back and correct it, because there were no African Americans back then. There were Negroes. Negroes, colors, and niggers. That's what it used to be. Those were the titles that African Americans were referred to. But to be called a Negro was a sense of honor in the community. But you did not have the hopes and dreams that you could rise above a certain level. And because of the stance that people like Fred Shuttlesworth and others in the community took, that said, no, that there has to be a better way. There has to be a better life. Because our children were being educated from books that were more than likely 20 years old, and to have a science book that had 20-year-old information put you behind the 8 ball already. You didn't have the up-to-date knowledge and the current knowledge necessary to propel yourself forward. There were many issues in the community that you could not avail yourself of simply because of the fact that your skin tone was different than others. And as people began to speak out, the power of government, the power of maintaining the status quo rose up to suppress those individuals that wanted to speak out. When James Armstrong wanted to integrate Graymont School with his children, there were many bomb threats and bombs going off that say, no, we're not going to allow that to happen here in the South. When Fred Shuttlesworth went to integrate Phillips High School, he was beaten unmercifully. When you had the Freedom Riders who came in on the buses to integrate the travel system here in America, they were beaten, buses were burned. So the system rose up to try to crush the hopes and dreams of the average African American just being treated normally, just having the right to go where they wanted to go, shop where they wanted to shop, eat where they wanted to eat. And because of those individuals who stood up and said, no, it's time for a change, then change began to happen. But I don't want anyone to think that it was a united front, because in Dr. King's letter that he wrote from the Birmingham jail, it was in response to a letter that was written by a number of ministers asking him, why are you doing this? We'll work out our problems. This is the way it's always been, and just leave things alone and let things calm down so people won't get hurt. And his response was that, we can't wait. Now is the time for us to take action to change these things. And if you truly are men of God, you will stand with me. Well, that resonated throughout not just Birmingham, but throughout the world, throughout the country. And as you know, in 1963, what really culminated the civil rights movement to a worldwide action was the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church. How could you have people so hell-bent on maintaining the status quo that they would be willing to bomb the most sacred place on a Sunday morning? How could that happen? And here America stood for freedom, America stood for justice, but we had this going on. And how could you stand in the UN and tell Russia or the Soviet Union to change your ways, to tell China change your ways, to tell other countries how to live, when in fact you had the scourge of segregation and Jim Crow laws that existed right here? So with that background and that backdrop of the change that took place during that period of time, it led to better education for our children. We are all products of that education. It led to better jobs. I never will forget the first time that I started working for the corporate world with the Xerox Corporation. They didn't hire me because they loved William Bell and they thought William Bell was a dynamic salesperson. They hired me because the federal government had instituted a policy saying that any Fortune 500 company that does business with the government had to have an affirmative action plan. Next thing I know, they were knocking on my door to come and work for the Xerox Corporation. And those stories went on throughout the community, but it was because of the struggle that took place during that time. Now, the people who are going to follow me are people who have taken a very active role in leadership that opened many doors to allow all of us to be free. And for those white males in the room, I've always heard that story. You cannot be free if your foot is on someone else's neck, because while you have your foot on that person's neck, you can't move either. You can't rise. You can't move forward. To the women who are in this room, you would not have a place of prominence were it not for the civil rights movement and those things that propel all of us in consciousness to say we all must participate in this society to the best of our ability. So I want to thank you all for being a part of this. John, thank you for putting on this event, and I know it will be well worth it. I'll close by finally saying 2013 is a very significant year for the City of Birmingham, and we're going to be working to make sure that the world see that we're not the place that we used to be. We're a better place, and it's time for us to take our rightful place in the world as a city on the cutting edge of leading us to new heights in this community. So thank you all for being here.